everyone, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads. And in today's Better Beader episode, I'm going to show you how to extend or make a bracelet bigger. Sometimes you make a bracelet and it might be a little bit small and you think, oh, I need to make that bigger. We'll tackle how to make it smaller on another one. But in this one, I want to go over the different clasps and the way you can solve and make bracelets bigger that are already finished and ready to go. So the first solution is really simple. If you have a piece of jewelry that has a lobster tail on it, you're just going to make your own extender chain. So in this case here, it's my daughter's necklace. She's getting a little bit older, a little bit bigger. I'm just taking jump rings that are of an appropriate size, usually at least 20 gauge because you want them to hold their shape. And I'm just making a chain, adding these together, then closing them up so she can use it and have a different chain area to attach to. This is the easiest thing, whether or not it's a necklace or a bracelet, just to take some jump rings. If you have some chain that has big enough holes, chain also works really, really well for an extender, for necklaces, bracelets, anklets, etc. if you need to make them a little bit larger. So what happens if you have a bracelet with a toggle? It's going to be the exact same basically as the lobster clasp, but instead of adding extra loops, you're going to look where your bar is. Your bar is going to stay just like this Athens bracelet here. And I have a different toggle just for demonstration purposes, but you can purchase another one, or often toggles will come in groups of 2. Take that other toggle and a jump ring, open it up, put the jump ring through the current toggle, and attach to the loop of a second toggle. This is also a really fun way just to do a bracelet with all your random toggles that you may have left and toggle bars, because sometimes you have a ton. And it just looks like a really fun exterior kind of mix and match bracelet. But if you use the exact same toggle, when you go to put the piece on, you have the option then that one hangs down kind of like a charm, or the other one just hangs as part of the bracelet looking like an extender as you add the next one onto the back. So with a toggle, if you need a little bit more space rather than taking it all apart, just attach a second toggle onto the end of the piece, like this Athens bracelet. So for the Vesuvius bracelet here, I have a beautiful bracelet. Forgot I even made it, honestly. I was putting on my wrist yesterday and I was like, oh, this Vesuvius bracelet is beautiful. But I did make it really small. So in order to make something that has a button, and I use buttons a lot, this is one of the easiest ways, again, to make something longer. You're basically thinking about making that extender chain again onto the loop by making another loop that sits at the end. What's going to happen then again is it'll catch onto the second loop, and then that first one will just be there. If you want to, you can also hang little charms on the first loop. That way it makes it, if you always know that you're going to use the second loop, a little bit more decorative. What you're going to do is add a stop bead, sew through the last point on the actual loop for the clasp. So you're sewing through right onto, I have the exterior 11-0 here on the end. I've added 28 11-0s because I know that's what's going to fit around my table cup button at the end. Strung through, you're going to reinforce, sewing all the way back through that. When you come out the end, you tie the 2 knots together, and then I would recommend with your thread and needle in your hand, sewing back into the project a little bit and actually attaching and tying off the other end there as well. That way when you go back through, you don't have just that last little toggle bar or the little button loop that is independent. It's going to have the string further down through the project, and that way it's a little bit more of a safety when you're going back through. So here at the end of the seed beads, you're going to come on out, tie these 2 thread ends together, removing your stop bead, pulling that off. I'm going to tie these 2, and you notice I still have my needle and thread on. And if you want to, the starter thread, you could have also even kept and started further back, but then sewed up to the point. I'm going to go back through that same 11-0 that my thread is coming out of to make my second loop, and now I'm going to sew down into the bracelet that's already finished, a couple years old, and tie off my thread end further down. Once those thread ends are tied off and sewn further down, I'm just going to burn the 2 off, and now if I want to wear my Vesuvius bracelet, I have a second loop to attach to and to catch onto. That way I don't need to stretch it onto my bracelet really, really tight as I have that going. So you can make this, and you can do this multiple times. This is great for a necklace as well. If you want to extend a necklace, these loops along the back, give you an option generally for 2 to 3 inches, that if you make about 3 or 4 loops, they're going to give you that option that you can make your necklace from 16 the whole way to 18 or even 20 inches. If you happen to have a push clasp, like this silver harvest bracelet, and it's a little small, the push clasp can make it a little bit trickier to figure out and add to the end. You can purchase a second push clasp, use some jump rings into any openings that may be in the push clasp, and attach a second push clasp to sit right after it. That way, again, it works kind of like a little charm that you'll have 2 right next to each other, and this one would be inside. That is possible. However, a lot of times with these nicer push clasp, like these claspgarten styles, they're going to be a little bit pricey. So whether or not you want to add another $8 or $9 to your bracelet, that's questionable. What I would say instead is, if you remember the start side of your bracelet or necklace, start there. What I would recommend is going right in. This is where a thread zap or a thread burner is really, really helpful. Go right into that area, burn off the thread. If you're doing something like this where it's a herringbone stitch, you can see which direction the herringbone's in. So I'm going to actually flip over to the other side because this is going to be the exit of the herringbone. I can see how it's sitting. I'll find my end there, burn that off. Obviously the thread's going to fray a little bit. I'm going to take off about 3 or 4 stitches on the piece in order to go in, add them piece of thread and add them back onto the piece, and then extend it a little bit longer. Generally speaking, when you take the clasp off, and if you burn, and you have a nice quality clasp, it's not going to burn the clasp, don't worry. If you burn the clasp there and right where the thread edge is, even just trying to burn 1 to begin with, try to pull the thread out and pull the end of the pieces. If you're not positive on how the piece, whether or not it's a necklace or a bracelet, was ended, just make sure that you have enough beads to extend it, even if you go in and just add some individual little seed beads at the end. So if I need to, I can pick up my seed beads and I can just take the seed beads, add a little bit more length with a loop, and extend that little push clasp onto the loop end. So you can work through it, that you can burn this down, take off a couple of your beads. Usually I kind of massage them as I'm pulling them off, and then simply make a loop as if you are going to attach a toggle, or if you're going to attach a button clasp, and you'll be able then to add this other side of the push clasp or of the other multi-strand clasp, anything like that, you'll be able to add that further extended out. If you have more of the beads here, then you can obviously go in after burning off and create more of the stitch. Generally speaking though, if you are very careful and just burn that thread edge, you can usually pull off the last couple beads, tie a new piece of thread on, and there's a Better Beader episode already for that, and then extend the pattern a little bit further. Again, a simple solution and an easy one. If you do want to do it as an investment, you can grab another end of the exact same clasp or a similar clasp and use some jump rings to attach it to the end of the first clasp, and then it'll push in to that clasp as well. So that's a little bit harder of a solution, but sometimes you are going to need to remove one side of the clasp, not both sides, just one side of the clasp in order to make it a little bit longer. The last thing that we have to discuss is going to be, what about a bangle? So if you have a bangle bracelet that has stretched and stretched and is too small still, what are you going to do? So the easy thing is give it to a friend. There you go. You have a bangle that's too small, just give it to a friend that has a smaller wrist than you. Another thing that you could do is use it as a key or a purse fob. So you can put your keys on it, you have a nice keychain, good to go. If you really need to make it larger, just like we had to do with the Silver Harvest bracelet, what you're going to want to do is find a spot, if you can, in the design where you see that you've added thread. That's usually the easiest part. So if you can look and you can find a little burn section and you can say, oh, right there. There's where I added some thread. That's where I'm going to start with my thread zap or my thread burner and burn that little edge off. If it's done in multiple rows, that you're doing a project that you have, all right, I know I did this back section first and then I added the top, you may need to burn off the thread in 2 places. What you're going to think about is kind of like this is, a piece of pie or cake that you need to expand and shove another little piece in there. So what you're gonna do is burn off basically straight down the line, straight across the piece. What this is obviously gonna do is to create one piece, whether or not it's a necklace, bracelet, bangle like this. I would recommend finding a nice, cool, bigger bead. So if you want to, you can say, oh, whoa, let me grab a 6mm bead and add a 6mm bead there, tying the thread ends together. Better yet is going to be a large hole bead that you can basically make and think about like a little bit of a bandage almost, but a pretty bandage, because after you go through and burn through the actual piece, you're going to have two separate sides. You're going to take your thread and needle and you're going to add more thread and needle, connecting those two sides basically back together, but you need more space. That's the whole point of doing this. So pick a fun, pretty, larger bead, especially one that has a larger hole, because that's going to give you the opportunity to go in and actually sew between it and back through it and make it a little bit bigger as we're going there. Just like any sort of bracelet, you need to figure out how much more space and how much more room you need. If you can find a bead that makes up that space that is legitimately, 15mm, making it another ½ an inch bigger, that's awesome to use in that space rather than having to go back and add a ton of little beads and redo a lot of stitching. You can make it look like it was meant to be, that it just has this one focal bead right in the middle. Just like I did with the seed beads and doing the button too, if you have a bracelet like the yoga bracelet or like the leather wrap, you can always also add another piece of thread on to make a second loop. So just like we added the seed beads on, you can tie another piece of thread on and make a second loop to go on to your wrap bracelet to make that extendable as well. So if you need to make things bigger, it is possible. Sometimes it's super easy, like adding jump rings. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, performing a little bit of surgery and adding a little bit more space in there. As always, these Better Beader episodes are designed to make you a better beader. I'm sure you've had projects come along your table that are finished and are too small. Hopefully this helps to do the different ends and the techniques that were shown to help solve some of those issues so that you can wear the necklace that you want to, but it's just always been a little bit too short. Or you can put on the bracelet that used to be your mother's and is so tiny, look at it and see how to actually go in and expand that and use your jewelry making knowledge to look not only at your new pieces and things you've made, but also beautiful pieces that you may have inherited. A lot of times those inherited pieces are really, really tiny. Tiny necklaces, tiny bracelets, and just for a tinier form back in the 20s and 30s as you see some of that jewelry come along. So again, these Better Beader episodes, they're helpful to make you a better beader and to be able to problem solve. One thing that I rely heavily on is our audience. I want you to comment below and say the different unique and fun ways that you have used to expand different jewelry, make things bigger, or maybe even change it up a little bit. I know people would love to see your response and I can't wait to see them all. Also give a little thumbs up if this was helpful to you, and don't forget, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at PotomacBeads. Thanks again for joining me for another Better Beader episode. Hopefully this made you better at your craft, gave you some ideas and some inspiration as well. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy your new jewelry that may actually fit.